Last month I was a single father trying to make ends meet. My son had just won $800,000 from a lottery ticket. I thought maybe life was finally turning around for us. One night, I got home from work, turned the key in the lock, and stepped inside our run-down apartment. I expected to see him chilling out after school. Instead, he stormed out of his room and shouted, "Get out!" At first, I thought it was just teenage drama, but something felt off. I couldn't shake that heavy feeling in the air. I wished I could just talk to him. Over the next few days, he changed. He was tense, on edge, like he was hiding something. I didn't want to invade his space, but I was worried. I noticed his phone buzzing at weird times, and sometimes he would whisper when I walked by. His eyes flickered to the door, like he was waiting for someone. Then came the visitors. They weren't the kind of people you want around your kid. I could hear low voices through the thin walls, muffled conversations that sent chills up my spine. My mind turned dark. I thought they could be after the money. I felt trapped, wanting to protect him but needing answers. I should have asked him what was going on. One night, I caught him talking to a stranger by his door. Their voices were low, but the other man's tone was deep, unsettling. I leaned against the wall, trying to listen. I wanted to shout, to drag my son back into the safety of our home, but my voice wouldn't come out. I was frozen in fear. Days slipped by, and each one felt like a fog. I got up, went to work, then came home to that peeling paint and buzzing lights. The apartment felt like it was closing in on me. Something terrible was brewing underneath the surface. One evening, I stepped into the living room. My son was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. I asked if he was okay. He turned and looked at me with hollow eyes. "You don't understand," he said. I wanted to cry, but all I felt was frost creeping in. My gut told me something was wrong, but I didn't know what to do. The tension in that room became unbearable. I could feel it in my bones. Then it happened. I saw him laughing with that stranger again, a twisted smile on his face. Before I could even reach for him, he turned and glared at me. "Get out!" he yelled, and I stumbled backward, shocked. The door slammed shut behind me like a gunshot. I stood frozen, barely processing what had just happened. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I should have listened to him. Now I was outside, lost. I didn't know who my son was anymore, or why he pushed me away. What happened to him? Why did he do it? I still don't understand why he shouted those words. The haunting questions linger like ghosts in the air, and I'm left wondering if I'll ever get my boy back. I stood outside our apartment, heart racing, mind spinning with confusion and fear. The door had slammed shut, but I couldn't just walk away. I felt like a ghost haunting a place that once was home. I paced back and forth, unsure of what to do next. I wanted to call out to him, to tell him I was still here, but the words felt stuck in my throat. Finally, I took a deep breath and headed down the hallway. Maybe someone in the building had seen or heard something that could explain his sudden shift. I knocked on a few doors, but most were met with silence. Then I reached apartment 3B. A woman in her late 60s opened the door, her face lined with concern. "Is everything all right?" she asked, peering at me with kind eyes. "My son. I think he's in trouble." I stumbled through the words, revealing bits of my worry. She frowned, her gaze shifting towards the shadows in the hallway. "I've seen some strange folks coming and going, especially lately," she revealed. "They don't look like the types I want around my grandkids." My stomach knotted. "What do you mean? Who are they?" "There was this man, dark-haired, wearing a leather jacket. He talked to your son a few days ago." She lowered her voice, glancing nervously toward the closed door. I didn't like the way he was looking at him. Did he ever come inside? My voice was barely a whisper. The woman's expression turned grave. Once or twice. I thought it was just boys being boys, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. I've seen things go south too many times, son. You need to be careful. I thanked her and stepped away, my heart sinking even deeper. I needed to know what was happening behind that door, but I felt powerless. The truth was, I was terrified of confronting him again. What if my son rejected me again? What if he turned into someone I didn't recognize? The hallway echoed with uncertainty. "What are you doing?" I murmured to myself. I knew I couldn't just stand there. The thought of losing him for good was more than I could bear. I needed answers. As the sun began to set, I gathered my courage and walked back to our apartment. I lifted my hand to knock, but before I could, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I fumbled it out, eyes wide with dread. A message flashed on the screen. It was from an unknown number. "Meet me at the corner of 5th and Elm. We need to talk about your son." A chill ran through me. Who was this? What did they know? My heart raced, knowing I had to go. Whatever it was, I had to find out. I could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. I hesitated just a moment, then turned and walked away from the door. The darkness was closing in, and the last night I saw my son seemed to linger in the air. I was stepping into a world I didn't want to be a part of, but I had no choice. There was no turning back now. The night air was crisp as I stepped out of the building, anxiety gripping me. My mind raced with questions. Who would know about my son? What had he gotten himself into? Each step toward the corner of 5th and Elm felt like a step into the unknown. As I walked, the familiar street started to twist into a maze of shadows. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, feeling vulnerable. Every sound echoed. A car door slamming, laughter from a nearby bar, the rustle of leaves. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Reaching the corner, I scanned the area. The street lamp flickered above, creating a patchwork of light and shadow. I spotted a figure standing near the edge of the light, hands stuffed in the pockets of a long coat. He looked around, clearly wary. "Are you the one who texted me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned slowly. A young man, maybe in his 20s, with short, messy hair and sharp features. "Yeah, I thought you'd show up." He gestured for me to come closer. "Who are you? What do you know about my son?" My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but I barely trusted this stranger. "I know he's in trouble," he said, staring directly into my eyes. "Trouble with people who don't play nice. I thought you should know." "What do you mean?" Panic washed over me. This couldn't be real. I wanted to recoil but found myself drawn in. He stepped into the light, revealing a worried expression. "I've been keeping an eye on him. I'm not one of those guys, just a friend from the neighborhood. He's been hanging out with a bad crowd." "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" I felt anger bubbling, frustration mixing with fear. I tried, but he wouldn't listen. He's caught up in something that's not just dangerous, it's life-changing. He hesitated. "He won money, right? A lot of it?" I nodded, suddenly aware of how much that lump sum meant in my son's world. "Yeah, but that's all I know. People want a piece of that. They don't care how they get it." His voice was urgent, almost pleading. "I think they're threatening him." "Threatening him?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Who are they?" "I can't get too specific. Just trust me. You need to warn him." He paused, looking over his shoulder nervously. "But it's not safe to talk here. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was desperate for answers. Where do we go? Before he could respond, a car sped around the corner, headlights blinding us both. The young man stiffened, eyes wide with alarm. We have to get out of here now. Panic surged through me as I felt the tide of danger rising. We moved away from the corner, heart racing. The car stopped abruptly, its engine humming ominously. That's when I saw it. A figure stepping out, leather jacket glistening in the dim light. My heart sank. Someone had come looking for my son, and I was right in the middle of it. I froze, staring at the figure. The street lamp hardly illuminated him, but I could make out the smug grin on his face. This was someone who enjoyed intimidation. "Who is that?" I whispered, fear threading through my voice. "A dealer. He's not here for a chat. We need to go," the young man urged, grabbing my arm. I felt the adrenaline rushing through me as we turned to run down the alley adjacent to the street. We dashed past garbage bins and flickering lights, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the narrow passage. My mind raced with thoughts of my son. Was he safe? What had he done to attract this kind of attention? The young man led the way, glancing behind us every few seconds. "Where are we headed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice low, anxiety clawing at my throat. "Just trust me. There's a place I know, a safe spot for now," he replied, urgency pressing in on us. We came to a small door at the end of the alley, half hidden behind a tangle of weeds. The young man knocked quickly, 2 rapid taps followed by a pause. The door creaked open, revealing a tall woman with sharp features. She peered at us suspiciously. "Who's this?" she asked. "Friend. We need to get in. Fast," he said, pulling me along as she stepped aside. Inside, the room was dim, illuminated only by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. I could see shelves crammed with books and odd trinkets. It felt oddly cozy, yet precarious at the same time. "Okay. Explain," the woman said, crossing her arms. "What's going on?" I glanced at the young man. "What do we do now?" he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "First, we need to figure out where your son is. Then we can assess how serious this really is." "What do you mean?" I demanded, frustration bubbling up. "You said he's in trouble. We can't just sit here." He raised his hands, trying to calm me. "I didn't mean that. But if we act too rashly, we might make things worse. You said he had a large amount of money, right?" "Yes, $800,000. But what does that have to do with anything? That puts a target on his back. It means a lot of people want that money legally or illegally. If we can find out who he's with, we might be able to help." Suddenly a loud crash echoed from outside, followed by shouts. My heart raced again. "What was that?" "It's them," the woman said, her voice tense. "They're looking for you." I was about to scream or bolt for the door when the young man grabbed my shoulder. "Stay calm. We need a plan. They have ways of finding us, and we can't let them know we're here." As I tried to catch my breath, I felt the weight of fear tighten its grip. I hadn't wanted this confrontation, but I had no choice now. I needed to protect my son, whatever it took. Then the door was suddenly kicked open, and 3 men rushed inside, eyes scanning the room like they knew exactly who they were hunting. "Where is he?" one of them barked, his voice a low growl. My pulse quickened. I had to decide. Run or stand my ground for my son. I didn't have much time to think. My body instinctively crouched into a defensive position, trying to shield myself as much as I could. The young man stepped in front of me, a barrier between me and the men who had burst in. "Get back!" he shouted, pushing me further into the shadows. The woman took a step toward the intruders, her expression unreadable. "Who are you looking for?" she said coolly, a sharp edge to her voice. The men narrowed their eyes, clearly weighed down by an impatience that was growing more dangerous by the second. You know who we want. The same one barked again. Your friend's kid. Where is he? I swallowed hard. They were after my son. No one knew where he was but me. I could feel panic rising, but I knew I had to stay silent. Any slip of the tongue could send him deeper into danger. Your so-called friend isn't here, the woman said, her stance resolute. You'd best leave before things get ugly. Her bravado seemed bold, but I could sense her nervous energy. Then, one of the men stepped forward, eyes fixed on me, and I felt as if he could see through me. You're in the way. Find him, or you'll regret it. Leave now or I'll make you, she retorted, her voice steady. I could see that she was serious, but I wondered how far she would actually go to protect us. In a heartbeat, chaos erupted. One of the men lunged for her, but the young man stepped in, blocking the attack. I could barely breathe as I watched the two men shove her aside. The air thickened with fear, and I could feel the dread creeping in. I darted my gaze around the room, searching for an escape route. There was a small window behind a stack of boxes, but I couldn't slide through it alone. The young man had a clear stance, keeping the men at bay, but I knew he wouldn't hold them off for long. Run! He yelled. Go! I hesitated for a split second, then moved. I couldn't let them take me. I crouched low and made a dash toward the back of the room, darting past the shelves lined with strange objects. The door lay just past the melee. My heart raced. I had to get out. That was when I heard it. A loud thud, followed by a gasp. I glanced back and my stomach sank. The woman had fallen to the ground, and the young man was struggling to regain control. I should have helped, but instinct pushed me forward. I burst through the door, into the dark alley. As I sprinted into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I had left them behind, but at what cost? I needed to find my son before it was too late. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flicker of movement near the end of the alley, and I froze. Someone was there, watching. I felt the icy grip of fear clutch my throat again. Who was it? Why were they following me? I shifted my weight, trying to make sense of the shadowy figure. Whoever it was, they stood still, yet I could feel their gaze locked onto me. Panic surged through me, and my instincts screamed for me to hide. I backed up against the cold, rough wall of the alley, hoping to blend into the darkness. Then, to my horror, the figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar face. It was Marcus, an old friend I hadn't seen in years. His expression was tight, eyes darting nervously back toward the entrance of the alley. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I was coming to find you," he replied, glancing over his shoulder. "We don't have much time. They're looking for you. We need to go now." I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. Why would he care? The urgency painted across his features told me this wasn't just a casual visit. "Why? Who are they?" "Does it matter? They'll come for you too," he hissed, stepping closer. "We can't stay here. It's not safe." I shook my head, trying to squeeze out the fear creeping into my thoughts. "I can't leave. I have to find my son." Marcus hesitated, then reached out and grabbed my arm. "Your son is in danger. They want him, not you. But if they think you're close, they'll come after you. Come with me, please." His words sent a chill racing down my spine. I thought of the young man and woman who faced those men for me. I couldn't abandon them. "What about—" "Too late." He cut me off, eyes widening. "Now, we have to move." As I looked back down the alley, my heart sank. There was no time. I had to trust him, even if everything in me screamed to go back. Hesitation roared through my veins, but desperation pushed me forward. "Okay," I whispered, and we started to run. We sprinted through darkened streets, avoiding busy intersections. I couldn't shake the image of the woman lying on the floor, the young man trying to fight off those men. The guilt of leaving them behind gnawed at me, but I shoved it down. I had to focus. Marcus led me through a series of back alleys, breathing hard as we moved deeper into familiar neighborhoods. The adrenaline was making it hard to think straight. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "To my place. It's safe. For now," he replied. But as we turned a corner, I spotted headlights illuminating the end of the street. A car was making its way toward us. My heart raced at the sight. I could see the shadows of at least 3 men inside. They were searching. I ducked behind a dumpster, pulling Marcus down with me. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. "What do we do?" I whispered, fear tightening my throat. "Maybe they'll pass us," he said, eyes wide as he peered out. But the fear in his voice told me he didn't believe it. I could hardly breathe as the car slowed. Then, in an instant, the engine cut off. That's when I saw it. One of the doors swung open, and a figure stepped out, scanning the area. It was the man who had spoken to the woman back in the building. He looked determined, like a predator on the hunt. My stomach dropped. "Get ready to run," Marcus urged softly, and I realized we might not have a choice. Before I could respond, I saw another figure emerging from the shadows behind the car. Fear crawled back into my mind as I wondered how many were out there. And just like that, everything went dark. My eyes snapped open, but everything was pitch black. The world felt heavy and confusing, as if I had been yanked from one nightmare into another. I squinted, trying to make out the shapes around me, but there was nothing. Panic gripped my throat like a vice. "Marcus?" I called out, but my voice sounded muffled, swallowed by the darkness. "Here," he replied, his voice close, though it seemed distant. "I think they missed us. Just stay quiet." I forced myself to calm down. I could hear faint footsteps outside, the scuff of shoes on pavement, the low murmur of voices. Were they looking for us? My heart raced as I pictured the figure from the car, the determined man scanning the street. "Where are we?" I asked, my words coming out in a whisper. "Just a supply shed. I know it's cramped, but it's hidden," Marcus said. "They won't find us here unless they really search." I pressed my back against the wall, feeling the rough wood against my skin. "What do they want with my son?" I asked, the question edging its way into my growing dread. "I don't know, but I think it's connected to what happened a few weeks ago. The night they came to your house." Images flooded back, chaotic and frantic. The door being kicked in, shouting. "You think they already got to him?" The thought terrorized me. "Please tell me he's okay. I don't know. I just came to warn you," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But there's more. These guys, they've been planning something. They're connected to some dangerous people. I heard them mention your son's name." I swallowed hard. It felt like the bottom dropped out of my world. "How do you know so much?" Marcus shifted, the rustle of his clothes brushing against mine. "I overheard a conversation the last time I was out. They were talking about him, about making a move soon. That's why I had to find you." The footsteps outside grew louder. My breath hitched as the voices drew nearer. I glanced at Marcus, who gripped my shoulder tightly, his eyes wide. I could feel his fear merge with my own, and then, out of nowhere, the door to the shed rattled. My heart leapt into my throat as the doorknob turned. "Get down!" Marcus whispered fiercely, shoving me to the floor just as the door swung open. Light flooded the room, and I could make out silhouettes, dark figures standing in the doorway. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't see us. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the voices outside. "Check in here," one of the figures said, stepping inside. "He can't be far." I glanced at Marcus, whose expression was taut, eyes wide with panic. We both knew there was no way out now. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I heard a chilling sound. I recognized the voice of one of the men from the car, and he was getting closer. "Stay quiet," Marcus mouthed, and I nodded. Then just as the figure turned toward us, the shed fell silent. "Someone's in here!" he shouted, and the world tilted on its axis. Before I could register the danger, chaos erupted. The moment he yelled, I felt the air shift. The shadows moved like they were alive, and I instinctively pulled Marcus closer. I could see the figure's eyes scanning the shed, searching every corner. "Over here!" Another voice called from outside. "He's got to be in this area." "No," I murmured, panic bubbling in my throat. I shot a desperate look at Marcus, who was frozen in place, his jaw clenched. My heart raced as I calculated our options. We were trapped, with nowhere to run. The figure took a step forward, his boot crunching on debris. "There's definitely someone in here. Get in here and help me look." I didn't have time to think. My instincts kicked in. I looked around the shed, desperate for anything I could use. My eyes fell on an old, rusting shovel leaning against the wall. It was the only thing within reach. Marcus seemed to read my mind. "What are you planning?" he whispered, his voice tight. "If they find us, there's no telling what they'll do. We have to fight back." I grabbed the shovel, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "Wait for my signal," Marcus said, his voice low. I could see the fear fighting with determination in his eyes. The door slammed open wider, and a tall figure stepped in, silhouetted against the light. "Show yourself! I know you're in here." I could barely breathe. Just as the man took another step, Marcus shouted, "Now!" I swung the shovel with all my might, catching the figure off guard. The metal connected with a thud, and he stumbled back, shock evident on his face. "Run!" Marcus shouted, darting for the door. I followed close behind, adrenaline flooding through me. But as we burst out into the open air, everything changed. Outside, the street was dim but not empty. A group of figures stood in a huddle, and they turned as soon as they heard the commotion. "What the hell?" one of them yelled, pointing in our direction. "Get them!" Another shouted, and suddenly we were running for our lives. We darted down a narrow alley, hearts pounding. I didn't know where we were headed, just that we needed to get as far away from them as possible. "Do you know where we are?" I gasped. "No time for questions," Marcus shouted back, glancing over his shoulder as footsteps echoed behind us. As we turned a corner, I saw an opening up ahead. "There!" I yelled. "Let's go." But just then, a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking our path. I froze, panic rising in my chest. "You won't get past me," he growled, and I could see the glint of something sharp in his hand. Everything I thought I knew crumbled around me. I had to protect Marcus and find my son, but now I was face to face with a new threat. "Back off!" I screamed, raising the shovel as the man advanced. Then everything went dark. I gasped as consciousness flooded back, my heart racing. I lay on the cold ground, disoriented and blinking against a sudden glare of light. Above me stood Marcus, fear etched across his face. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice shaking. I nodded, but it felt weak. I pushed myself up, noting the twisted and cracked asphalt underneath. We were in an alley, its walls towering over us like dark sentinels. The sounds of footsteps echoed around the corner, growing closer. We have to move, I urged. I glanced around, searching for escape routes. A dumpster loomed nearby, heavy and metal, offering temporary shelter. Over there. I pointed, and Marcus followed me behind it. The footsteps grew louder, and I held my breath. They can't find us here, I whispered, my heart pounding in my ears. I leaned closer to him, trying to keep my voice steady. What happened back there? Did they knock me out? I think so, he said, his eyes darting down the alley. You did swing the shovel hard enough to give that guy a scare, but it didn't stop them all. I should have seen that coming, I muttered, kicking myself for letting my guard down. Suddenly a bright flashlight beam swept over our hiding spot, the light flickering like an unwelcome presence. Check behind the dumpster, a voice commanded. We can't stay here, Marcus whispered urgently. Just wait, I hissed. I could feel the edges of panic creeping back in. My mind raced as the voices continued. If we were caught, I couldn't even imagine what they'd do. Then I heard another sound, the low rumble of an engine. My heart skipped. It was coming closer. I peeking through the edge of the dumpster, and to my surprise, I saw a van pulling up, headlights cutting through the shadows. The figures in the alley shifted, shadows merging and separating under the light. They're heading toward the van, one of the men shouted, and the urgency in his voice pushed me into action. Now, while they're distracted, I said, grabbing Marcus's arm. We ducked low and sprinted toward the street. The van's side door slid open, and my instinct screamed for me to hurry. But as we got nearer, I froze again, catching sight of the driver. Wait, I know him. It was the local mechanic, Ray, one I sometimes saw in town. He looked out, his expression unreadable. My heart raced further. Did he know what was happening? Was he with them? Get in! He yelled, suddenly sounding less like a stranger and more like a lifeline, urgency etched across his features. I hesitated, but Marcus grabbed my hand, pulling me with him. We leapt into the van, and the door slammed shut behind us. My eyes scanned the interior. It was dark, with tools and bags strewn across the floor. But before I could catch my breath, Ray hit the gas. I turned to him, confusion bubbling inside me. What's going on? Why did you show up? Later! He shouted, eyes glued to the road as we sped away. First, we need to get you two safe. The sound of sirens began in the distance, blending with the roar of my thoughts. It wasn't over yet. I still needed answers about Marcus and my son. My heart sank as I realized I still didn't know where he was. And now it seemed my troubles were just beginning. As the van careened through the labyrinthine streets, a constant pressure settled in my chest. Sirens blared farther away, but I could almost hear them getting closer. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the seat as I turned to Ray. Where are we going? I asked, my voice barely louder than a whisper. Trust me. Just hold on, he replied, eyes darting to the rearview mirror, scanning for any signs of pursuit. I glanced at Marcus, whose face was pinned with tension, deep lines etched into his brow. What do we do next? He asked, his voice hardly masking his anxiety. I shook my head. I wish I knew. All I can think about is my son. A wave of guilt crashed through me. I had gotten us into this mess, and the thought of what I might have risked my son's life for gnawed at me. Ray took a sharp turn, and I felt the weight of uncertainty descend heavily upon me. Keep your heads down, he instructed, steel in his tone. If anyone's out there looking for you, they don't know I'm helping you. Not yet. Why are you helping us? I blurted out before I could stop myself. Are you involved in this? Listen, you don't know me well, but I've seen things, and I don't want to be part of whatever's going on with those men. He replied, knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. We moved in silence as the van sped onward, my heart hammering against my ribs with every thought of my son. What could he possibly be going through? And why had Marcus said those men were connected? I clenched my fists, feeling helplessly trapped in my worries. After what felt like an eternity, Ray pulled into a hidden garage behind an old warehouse, shutting the engine off, plunging us into abrupt silence. He jumped out, gesturing emphatically for us to follow. I clutched Marcus's arm, fear still gripping me. We stepped into the dim light of the garage, the rhythmic sound of distant machinery humming around us. "Stay close," Ray said, leading us through a maze of equipment and old vehicles. "This way. I have a safe place to hide you." "Why do you even care?" I shot back, the anxiety boiling over. "The more I think about it, the less sense this all makes." Ray slowed, looking back at us. "You don't understand how dangerous this is. People are driven by greed. No one wants to be caught in the crossfire. But your son, he's mixed up in something much bigger than just money." "What do you mean?" I pressed, scrambling to process his words. "What did you hear?" Ray hesitated, and I could see gears turning in his mind. "When I spotted you at the diner last week, you were talking about the lottery. I overheard a few guys whispering about a kid with money and how they'd make a plan to take it from him. Your son needs to be careful." That gnawing dread clawed deeper into my mind. "So, you think they've got him? What if they do something to him?" Ray opened a door into what seemed like a makeshift living space. "I don't know, but if we don't act fast, we may never find him." A heavy weight sat upon me. Where was my son? It felt like the world was falling around me, and I was powerless to stop any of it. Marcus squeezed my arm. "We have to go back and find him, no matter what it takes." I shook my head, frustration boiling over. "And risk exposing ourselves again? We barely made it out alive." "I can help," Ray offered unexpectedly, his voice firm. "I have connections, people who know the area, who might have seen him." "What if those men find us again?" I challenged, dread coiling tightly within me. "Then we'll be ready," he said, a steely resolve in his tone. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the garage, and every hair on my body stood on end. We exchanged panicked glances, fear coursing through us. "Hide!" Ray ordered urgently. "Now!" Marcus and I ducked behind a pile of crates just as the garage door creaked open. My heart raced. Shadows moved against the dim light, silhouettes shifting like dangerous specters. "They're here," I breathed, the realization sinking in. "I can't see if it's them or not," Marcus whispered, his breath shaky. The murmurs grew louder. "Where is he?" one voice asked, tinged with menace. "They can't find us," Ray whispered, his hand gripping a wrench from a nearby toolbox. Suddenly the door swung wider, revealing a man leaning against the entrance, arms crossed in anticipation. My heart sank. It was one of the goons I'd seen in the alley before. My stomach turned, thinking of how close my son could be to all of this. Ray's posture stiffened beside me, and I could see a resolve settling in his eyes. "We have to make a break for it." But before we could even think it through, the man suddenly stepped forward, looking around. "I know you're in here," he shouted. A visceral rush of adrenaline surged through me. "Go!" Ray yelled, causing Marcus and me to spring to our feet. I didn't think. I just ran. Ran towards the only small window I could spot, not even glancing back to see if Ray was right behind us. As I threw myself through, a hand grasped my shoulder, and I gasped. "Marcus!" I shouted, fear clawing at me. But as soon as I fell onto the other side, a blink of light flickered, and then darkness. The presence of something cold washed over me, a feeling that skewed the edge of reality. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but confusion clouded everything. I staggered to my feet, and it was then that I felt it, the emptiness in my heart. My son was missing, and I was only deeper into this surreal nightmare. I had escaped, but at what cost? Would I ever find him again? I stood alone in the silence, wrapping my arms around myself, realizing that the answers were still out there, just beyond my reach, haunting me like whispers in the wind.